On the morning of December 25th, 1871, the bells of St. Bartholomew's Church rang exactly 3 times. And then stopped. Not cracked, not broken, just silenced. Inside the bell tower, the ropes were found cut clean through. No fraying, no struggle, as if someone had known precisely where to cut and why. By sunset, the town of Blackwater Ridge, Louisiana, would discover something far worse. 5 men were missing, all respected, all wealthy, all church elders, plantation trustees, or orphanage overseers. And all of them had signed the same document 32 years earlier. A Christmas Eve ledger. A list of names. A family separated. What makes this case endure, what makes historians whisper instead of write, is not that the men vanished. It's what was left behind. In one master's parlor, the family Bible was open to the Book of Ruth, every male name scratched out. In another home, portraits had been turned face down, except for one, a woman with dark eyes painted over in ash. At the orphanage, children woke screaming, claiming a woman stood in the hallway all night, counting. Not praying, counting. The sheriff ruled it mass flight. Then fire. Then fever. Then he stopped speaking altogether. Because buried beneath this town was a truth older than the buildings, older than the church, older than the law. A truth written in blood, memory, and Christmas Eve. And it began with a girl named Eliza May Holloway. Eliza May Holloway was born in 1839 on land that didn't belong to her, to parents who were listed as property, not people. But those who recorded births back then often wrote small lies between the lines. Eliza is observant. Eliza remembers too much. Eliza does not cry when disciplined. Her mother, Ruth, sang hymns softly at night, not to comfort Eliza, but to teach her rhythm. Her father, Josiah, taught her numbers by counting fence posts and steps between cabins. They were preparing her, not for freedom, for survival. Blackwater Ridge was not a place of open cruelty. It was worse. It was orderly, polite, God-fearing. Every sin was justified by Scripture. Every sale was called necessary. Every separation was called the Lord's will. Eliza learned early that silence kept you alive, but memory kept you human. And she remembered everything, especially Christmas Eve, 1850, the night the snow fell in Louisiana, something elders later swore never happened. The night the masters gathered after church. The night Eliza's family was broken apart with signatures and candle wax. The night the ledger was sealed. The document was officially titled Inventory Adjustment and Charitable Redistribution. But among those who signed it, it was called something else. The Christmas Arrangement. Families were liabilities. Bonds created resistance. Love made people dangerous. So the solution was systematic. Children to orphanages run by the church. Men sold south. Women reassigned to uplift lonely households. It was framed as mercy. Eliza watched as her father was taken first. No chains, just hands on shoulders and hymns sung louder than his voice. Her mother was next. Ruth kissed Eliza's forehead and whispered, "Do not forget us. That is how they win." Eliza did not cry when the wagon took her away. She counted the wheels. She counted the men watching. She counted the names whispered over brandy that night. And she memorized every face around that table. Because Eliza understood something none of them did. Some families are not held together by proximity. Some are held together by reckoning. Eliza was sent north, then east, then nowhere. Orphanage records show a girl who never spoke unless addressed. Church reports describe her as obedient, unsettling, spiritually intense. She learned Scripture not as faith, but as weaponry. She learned which verses were used to justify cruelty. She learned how men hid behind God when they were afraid. And she waited. Years passed. Then decades. Blackwater Ridge forgot Eliza. But Eliza never forgot Blackwater Ridge. When the men who signed the ledger began dying, quietly, one by one, no one connected the pattern. A fall down church steps. A fever that arrived overnight. A man found praying in an empty field, heart stopped, face peaceful. Until Christmas Eve, 1871, when the bells rang 3 times. And the counting began again. In the spring of 1870, a woman appeared on the outskirts of Blackwater Ridge. She did not arrive by road. She did not arrive with luggage. She simply began walking through town, barefoot, dressed in mourning black that never faded. Those who noticed her first described the same thing. She looked like someone who already knew us. She called herself May Holloway. No one questioned the name. Names had a way of changing here, especially for people no one wanted to remember. May rented a small room behind the apothecary. She paid an exact coin. She never bargained, never smiled. She attended church every Sunday, sitting in the back pew, head bowed, not in prayer, but in listening. What unsettled the pastor was not her silence. It was that she sang every hymn without the book. Word spread slowly. The elders began noticing small things. Ledger books misplaced, keys hanging where they had not been left, dogs refusing to approach May when she passed. At night, men dreamed of counting. Fence posts, footsteps, names spoken aloud in voices not their own. No one connected these disturbances to the quiet woman in black, except the orphanage matron. She recognized May the moment their eyes met. Because May did not look older. She looked preserved, as if time had simply waited for her. St. Dunstan's orphanage stood at the edge of town like a moral monument. White walls, iron gates, scripture carved above the door. Suffer the little children to come unto me. Inside, records were immaculate. Too immaculate. Children arrived nameless. Children left renamed. Children who asked questions were sent to the cellar for reflection. May volunteered there quietly. She never touched the children. She watched, and the children watched back. They began drawing the same picture, without being taught. A house, a table, and people sitting together again. At night, the children whispered about the woman who stood in the doorway after curfew. She never spoke. She counted. The matron confronted May once. Asked her why she came. May replied calmly, I am returning what was borrowed. Within a week, the matron vanished. Her room showed no struggle. Just a Bible laid open, and beneath it, a folded scrap of paper. A name, her real name, one that had been erased in 1850. The first confirmed death was Edgar Whitlow, former plantation trustee, church donor, signer of the Christmas ledger. He was found kneeling in his study, hands folded, eyes open. No wounds, no poison, just a smell, cold wax and iron. On his desk lay the ledger copy he had kept hidden for decades. Every name on the page had been crossed out, except one. Eliza May Holloway. The coroner ruled it heart failure. But the coroner's wife claimed Edgar had been screaming before the silence came. Not begging. Apologizing. That night, May was seen washing her hands in the river. She did not scrub. She let the water run red from the rust on her rings. Rings no one had ever noticed before. Engraved inside each band were initials. Not hers. Theirs. By winter, the pattern was undeniable. Every man who had signed the ledger was dying. But the church could not act. Because the church had been the author. The separation of families had not been a crime. It had been a policy. Blessed. Documented. Sanctified. May began leaving sermons unfinished. Scripture margins filled with notes written in an older hand. Verses about judgment circled in ash. The pastor attempted confession. May listened. Then asked one question. Did God tell you to sign? Or did fear? The pastor was found days later, alive, but unable to speak. His mouth opened and closed like he was still counting, still remembering, still hearing names spoken aloud. Blackwater Ridge began locking doors at sunset. But doors only stop strangers. They do not stop memory. By February of 1872, Blackwater Ridge no longer looked outward. No travelers stayed. No letters were sent without being read twice. No one spoke names after dark. The town developed rituals that were never written down. Windows were covered at sundown. Mirrors were turned toward walls. Church bells were no longer rung, only tapped once, softly, by hand. Because people had begun seeing her. Not just May. Eliza. Women reported glimpses of a younger figure reflected behind them. Barefoot, hair loose, eyes steady. Men dreamed of a child standing at the foot of their bed, holding a book too heavy for her arms. Inside the dreams, the child always asked the same question. Which one of you decided? The sheriff tried to form a patrol. 3 men volunteered. 2 resigned after the first night. The third walked into the river at dawn, fully dressed, Bible pressed to his chest. He did not drown. He simply stopped moving. Pinned inside his coat was a page torn from the ledger. His own signature circled in ink. May purchased a property no one wanted. A small, square house with boarded walls and no windows. Once used as a temporary holding structure during transfers. Inside, neighbors claimed they heard singing. Not hymns. Lullabies. Old ones. Those who passed close enough swore the air changed, thickened, slowed, as if memory itself lived there. Inside the house, May had reconstructed something lost. A table, 3 chairs, place settings that were never used. She spoke aloud while setting them. Not to ghosts, to history. You are not forgotten. You are not misplaced. You are still counted. Each night, another chair was turned upright. Each morning, another master failed to wake. Despite rumors, there was no violence as the town understood it. No blades. No bloodshed witnessed. No public spectacle. What killed the men was recognition. Each death followed the same progression. First, insomnia. Second, auditory memory, voices long buried. Third, uncontrollable confession, often spoken aloud to empty rooms. The final stage was always the same. They returned to the moment of separation, not as masters, as witnesses. They remembered the faces they refused to see, the cries they relabeled as necessary, the signatures they pretended were neutral. Their hearts failed under the weight of knowing. May did not hunt them. She reminded them, and memory finished the work. On March 24, 1872, the church caught fire. Not the sanctuary, the archive room. The fire spread only where records were kept: births, transfers, reassignments. Every document tied to family separation turned to ash. Nothing else burned. May was seen standing outside the church, unmoving, as smoke rose. Someone shouted for her to help. She replied, "It is already done." Inside the ashes, investigators found something impossible. The ledger's final page, untouched. No signatures. No names. For decades, Blackwater Ridge told itself a simple lie: that Eliza's family had been relocated. That separation was temporary. That survival was possible within the system. The truth surfaced only after the ledger burned. Josiah Holloway, Eliza's father, had been sent south to a sugar plantation where records ended within 6 months. No burial listed. No transfer logged. Ruth Holloway, her mother, was reassigned to a minister's household under the condition of silence. She died unnamed, buried beneath a wooden marker marked servant. They never reunited. They never escaped. The Christmas arrangement had not scattered families. It had erased them. Eliza learned this slowly, painfully, through fragments, confessions whispered by dying men, notes hidden in psalms, names scratched into floorboards by those who had tried to remember before her. What the masters underestimated was not her anger. It was her patience. Eliza did not seek revenge. She sought restoration. And restoration, she believed, required truth to be faced in full. After the final disappearances, Blackwater Ridge attempted what it always had: erasure. Deaths were attributed to illness. The fire blamed on faulty lamps. May Holloway described as a transient. Church leaders advised silence for the good of the community. But silence no longer worked. Children began asking forbidden questions. Why did the orphanage close? Why were names scratched out of hymnals? Why did Christmas Eve feel heavy? People reported hearing chairs scraping on empty floors at night. Not haunting, preparation. As if someone was setting a table the town refused to see. The last person to speak with Eliza was the schoolteacher. A woman too young to have signed the ledger, but old enough to inherit its benefits. She asked Eliza why she stayed. Eliza answered quietly, because leaving would make it unfinished. She confessed then, not to crimes, but to purpose. She had not reunited her family in life. She had reunited them in memory. She had restored their names to the world. She had forced witnesses to carry what they once discarded. Before dawn, Eliza was gone. The house with no windows was empty. The table remained. 3 chairs upright. 1 extra chair, newly added. Historians later argued whether Eliza was one woman or many. Whether the deaths were coincidence or mass guilt. Whether Blackwater Ridge was unique or merely exposed. But the descendants knew something else. Family stories changed. Names once missing returned to genealogies. Graves were remarked. Children were named Eliza, Ruth, Josiah. Not in fear, in recognition. Because reunion does not always mean living together again. Sometimes it means being remembered together. And sometimes, that is enough to bring a town to its knees. Blackwater Ridge did not collapse after Eliza left. That was the cruelest part. The town continued. Fields were planted. Children were born. Church bells rang again, though never on Christmas Eve. But something had shifted permanently. People spoke differently. They hesitated before using words like necessary, order, tradition, because those words had once hidden something monstrous. The orphanage building was abandoned. No one would buy it. No one would demolish it. At night, neighbors reported lights inside. Not flickering. Steady. As if someone were keeping watch. No one ever entered. No one ever locked the door. In 1913, a historian attempted to document Blackwater Ridge. His notes end abruptly. The final entry reads, "This town resists categorization. It is not haunted. It is accountable. Church archives from the region show a sudden shift after 1872. Family units preserved. Transfers reduced. Language changed. Not out of mercy, out of fear of remembrance. Because Eliza had proven something dangerous, that the past does not require witnesses to survive. It only requires truth. This story was never taught, not because it lacked evidence, but because it exposed a system, a collaboration between church, law, and economy that thrived on separation. Eliza did not destroy it. She interrupted it. And interruption is harder to erase than rebellion. So the story was buried, reduced to whispers, renamed folklore. Until now, if you visit Blackwater Ridge today, you will find nothing remarkable. No plaque, no monument, no mention of Eliza Holloway. But locals will warn you about one thing. Never set a table with empty chairs on Christmas Eve, because memory listens. And sometimes, families reunite.